His whole operating system is dillygaff, right? Do I look like I give a flip? No, he does not. Laws mean nothing to him. Boundaries that have been established and solidified in blood of D-Day mean nothing to him. This is about money and enriching himself and his family personally.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee and welcome to the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday to Friday on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining us today, I'm delighted to say, is former US Naval Intelligence Officer Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, it's always a pleasure to have you on the Trump Report. How are you?
Well, as good as can be expected in these turbulent times.
And I should mention straight off the top, you're actually about to be leaving the US shores because you and my colleague Louis Sykes are actually going to Greenland. I don't want to give away too much, but just let the audience know that we'll be bringing them lots of good content from that trip.
Yeah, it'll be my second time in a year. I spent almost the better part of a month and in Greenland and Denmark last year doing analysis of this exact same crisis. And I was warning a year ago that this was going to come to a head, and it appears to really be coming to a head.
But right now, Malcolm, it's been a very, very busy 24 hours, and I am not talking about the Brooklyn Beckham drama, I'm afraid. We're talking about something completely different. Let's start with Donald Trump. He took to Truth Social overnight to talk about the UK's decision to hand the Chagos Islands back to Mauritius. He wrote this really, really long post, but I'm just going to pick some bits out for you. He's talked about it and said, for no reason whatsoever, in capitals. Then he said that the UK giving away extremely important land is an act of great stupidity and is another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired. We'll get into some specifics in a second, but can the special relationship survive this?
Well, I'm sure the special relationship can survive some things. There's one thing it cannot survive. Let's just be honest. And this special relationship, really goes back to the World War One with the intervention of the United States on the side of the Allied Expeditionary Force. People think it started with Roosevelt in World War II, and Churchill. That's the very special relationship that has been sustained to this point. But if Donald Trump goes ahead with this hegemonistic, imperialistic belief that nations are to be seized and resources are to be just grabbed at will, like his idol, Vladimir Putin, then I'm sorry, the relationship between the United States and Britain is going to be fractured and fractured in such a way that I don't know how it would be repaired. It could be repaired with a new president who reverses all of this, but the trust that you can believe America is a rational state will pretty much be over. I mean, we have 1/3 of our population, not our population, of the voting base, right? Which is not the entire population, about 24% of the population, thinks that this is just awesome and that Donald Trump should seize whatever territory he wants and should use the military in any way that they can, I mean, in an almost Roman imperialistic way of marching on Gaul, marching on Germania. This isn't going to end well if it happens. And I'm glad I saw Starmer's speech yesterday, where he was putting the United States on notice in very polite terms.
That is, I mean, perhaps not before he became to power, but definitely as PM, that is by far the kind of sternest I've ever seen him with the US.
Well, I mean, I like it that, one could see that he left it up to the Minister of Defense to actually drop the harsh words almost a week ago, where he said, any operation that the United States would undertake against Greenland, you cannot use British soil, British personnel, British information, which is intelligence sharing, or British resources in doing it, and that they are committed to NATO, which is a collective defense. So if Donald Trump loses his mind and goes forward with a lightning seizure of Greenland, which is what I've been predicting for a year, that special forces, they'll just fly into Nook and Kangalushwak, overpower whoever's there, and raise the American flag, say it's our territory now. Now we're going to bring the resources in to defend it. If that happens, we are looking at the first United States versus NATO war. NATO, people say, oh, NATO will dissolve, all these countries will break down. No, they won't. It won't. NATO is still a body of 31 other countries in a treaty alliance. Granted, a few may leave, Slovakia, Hungary, some countries may go neutral, like Austria, but the remainder of NATO will definitely band together and will form this coalition against America. I can't even believe these words are coming out of my mouth.
Mm. I'm glad you said that because there's a comment that was made on the radio, on our friends at Time Radio earlier today. It was by the Times columnist and editor at large of the Wall Street Journal, Jerry Baker. Now, he said that he had heard from sources in the US that a US invasion of Greenland would be a clear breach of US law, and that would see senior US military officials resign sort of in refusal. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think he's playing it soft. It's not any treaty the United States signs has the force of American law. Donald Trump this last year has proven that he does not care what American law is. He breaks laws every day. And he just says this is just the way we're doing business. So long as there's no Congress, there's no, appetite amongst Republicans to hold him accountable because they agree with him 100%. They're not a Congress, right? They're a Duma. They're almost a Russian rubber stamp, a Politburo. So for him, there's no risk of him doing anything, that he wants to do because he can get away with it. Now, some people have said, notably Representative Bacon, that if he invades Greenland, that will open him up to impeachment. I don't think the Republicans with the Democrats, the ones who are opposed to it, have the numbers to impeach him. I
You
don't
really
think they
think
will. They
so?
can always introduce the articles, but you still have to have, 75% of the body has to impeach you. Then you have to get the United States Senate, the majority of the Senate to impeach, to convict you, to remove you from power. And where does that leave us? With J.D. Vance. So, and he's also pictured in here. Excuse me. So, like what you want about what's happening here with regards to law. Donald Trump does not believe in law, and only until something radical happens, like I'm afraid to say, U.S. service members are dying on another land without authorization. That may not be it.
You've led me into that because I saw the footage yesterday. More sort of soldiers from Denmark landed in Greenland. I think there was around 100 or so. I mean, watching it, it was kind of almost sort of dystopian. It was kind of like a pinch me moment. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But it got me thinking that this is obviously a big statement that, we won't be cowed by the US. But if America does invade, I mean, could we actually see some combat from those troops?
Absolutely. You'll see combat because, number one, soldiers don't go somewhere with their weapons to surrender. And the mindset that even the Danish armed forces have had. I mean, they fought alongside of us in Iraq, Afghanistan. They've got commanders who have combat experience, and not only that, they have pride in their nation. People tend to forget this. Greenland is not run by Denmark; it's managed by Denmark as part of a kingdom, right? You have Greenland, Denmark, and the Faroe Islands, and that but the people who are there have a shared cultural history with it goes back to, what is it, the 8th century. So their pride of having this country along with our allies, right, their allies, France, the Nord defense countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, if American forces do what we call a forced entry, where they parachute, some specialized unit like the 11th Airborne,
I thought you might be getting onto this, yeah.
yeah, which is mobilizing, then you're going to see combat. If special forces comes in there and do a lightning seizure, you're going to see that. And I warned the Danish government last May, on their largest TV program in Denmark, that this is how it was going to happen. And they did something that most people don't realize. They quietly mobilized forces exactly as we requested. I said send in Danish Marines. They sent 100 Danish light infantry into Nuuk. Because prior to that, there were only 40 policemen in the whole country. That's it. That was their defense. You put in 100 armed soldiers, you can take the airport, but you might not survive getting off the airport. And by putting these deterrent features in there, putting in a multi-role warship, a frigate, bringing fighter jets, F-35s to see how fast they can respond to a threat to Greenland, putting F-16s in Kangerlussuaq. Now they're plussing up to several hundred soldiers in the biggest bases like Kangerlussuaq, which is where the U.S. would want to seize that airport to use as a base of operations to take all these tiny little villages. It's just madness. But there's a twofold purpose of this. They can now say, oh, we're defending Greenland, just like you asked. But the United States is hell-bent. Let me rephrase that. Not the United States. 75% of Americans are flatly opposed to this. Donald Trump is willing to risk America's global standing and our economy for this madness.
You mentioned the 11th Airborne Division then. Let's talk about them, because there's been quite a few headlines and a few news articles this week that they are sort of being alerted and mobilised. And the reports we're seeing is that they're being mobilised to go to Minnesota, with sort of what we know happening in Minneapolis. What you're saying is, though, and you've been saying this for quite some time, that actually you think it might be something different. Just lay out your evidence for that, because like I say, the reports that we have obviously is that they might be being sent to Minneapolis and Minnesota.
Right. Listen, the 11th Airborne Division, which is stationed in Alaska, right, Joint Base Elmendorf, Richards, they are our only specialized trained combat force of infantry and artillery and mechanized, which is trained for combat in the Arctic Circle, right? Sub-zero temperature warfare. It's the only unit that we have. We have another unit that's trained for cold weather. Cold weather is, like -10 Celsius and above. Arctic weather is -11 and below, right? So the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum, New York, they could do it. They could go, but they are not Arctic trained. They are not Arctic equipped. They don't routinely run around in skis like they do in Alaska. So the statement that was made, and it's been since confirmed by the White House, that they have been put on alert. There's three levels, right? Alert, mobilization, deployment. Two, they have been put on alert for mobilization to deploy to Minnesota. Yeah, granted, Minnesota gets down to, sometimes -10 Celsius. But there are 13,000 Minnesota National Guardsmen that the president, by snapping his fingers, can take control of and deploy them in the state as his armed force. We saw this in California. We saw him bring National Guardsmen from all over the United States. He could bring them from northern Nebraska. These people understand cold weather environments. But to bring Arctic troops from Alaska to the continental 48 United States, the only thing this could be is one of two things. One, a strategic feint, right? The strategic deception that's being performed where these two battalions, 1,500 soldiers, are going to mobilize up, and they're going to get all their equipment, and they're going to get all of their weapons, and they're going to start drawing ammunition, which I don't even see why you would need that. You could draw ammunition down in Minnesota, right, from stocks in the first 48. And then they will board all these C-17 transports at Elmendorf, and they can do one of two things. They can fly south into the continental United States, get to Minnesota, stage there, right? Not actually do any police patrols or any of that, and then fly further on and go up the East Coast to Greenland. Or They can do all of this, be given a deployment order. They can get on those aircraft, draw their parachutes, because they're a parachute brigade, a division, and then they'll fly north over the North Pole, come down for over Patufic, continue on, do para jumps into Kanjalussuaq Airport, Nuuk Airport, and Narsarsuaq Airport, the three big ones in Greenland, and seize control of that country. At the same time, special forces are now landing aircraft onto these airports to be the spearhead. That's the only two options we have here. That unit is so incredibly specialized, and it is specialized for Greenland.
Is there not one third option, which I guess could be, here they are, we're going to deploy them to Minnesota and show the world on the world's cameras what they can do, kind of, I don't know, as a threat?
Well, I mean, you could, yeah, but why would you bring troops, Arctic troops from Alaska down to Minnesota when you have 48 other states' forces you can choose from? And the Minnesota Guard, they live in those cold, environment. This is their job, police patrol. It's also a possibility that they could bring them down there and let them do these show of force patrols down there while the president's making a decision to deploy. And let me tell you, if they made a decision to deploy to Greenland, the first thing that would happen was Canada would close its airspace. They would have to. They'd be forced to. You can't allow the United States to conduct an invasion flying from Alaska east, over the Canadian Arctic or south under, up through Halifax and Gander up to Greenland. You can't. But having them in the southern United or in the continental United States gives you a range of options. You could even leave some here. You could actually have the remainder of that division fly from Alaska while everyone's watching Minnesota. It's too clever by half. I mean, I've taken part in a lot of military and intelligence operations, three wars. I mean, this is different. It feels like a feint. And I said this a year ago. That is a tripwire unit. If the 11th Airborne is mobilized or alerted or mobilized or deployed, that is an unambiguous intelligence indicator that their intention is to take Greenland by force.
This week kind of feels like things are really coming to a head. Gavin Newsom sort of spoken out today. Now, we've got to take what Gavin Newsom says with a little pinch of salt because, he is perhaps a man who might have ambitions on being the next Democrat leader. But he sort of talked about Europe and he said that he called them pathetic and he said it's time for them to grow a backbone. I mean, they are all meeting with Trump in Davos this week. Is this kind of the week that you have to start asking, right, are you going to do anything about this? And if so, what?
Yeah, I'm not sure Gavin Newsom was really criticizing them as much as it might seem. He's very sympathetic since he has the fourth largest economy in the world, right? Just eclipsed Germany as the fourth largest economy in the world. It's incumbent on him to have these great relations with them, and also, but he is right. Europe does need to grow a backbone. They need to understand this is one thing that is leading Gavin Newsom to the front of the crowd, not for the Democrats, but for the presidency. I mean, he could bring in a lot of Republicans with the way that he talks. Um, and so Newsom warning the Europeans is part of the shtick that he's been doing in the United States. He sat down and made a straight face in the camera statement that Donald Trump is a existential threat to the existence of the United States and that it is a criminal enterprise masking as a government which is violating laws every day. I mean, a United States governor sat down. That just propelled him right to the top of the ticket, for the Democratic Party. But Europeans hearing this, he is the alternative, right? You ask, well, what's the alternative to Trump? That's the alternative. And if he's telling you to spine up because you've got 3 years left of this, and it can get much worse.
Do you not see, in 3 years' time, is there not also a situation where, if Donald Trump's sort of popularity continues to slide, then perhaps JD Vance might start kind of painting himself as a different kind of candidate to Donald Trump rather than more of the orthodoxy?
I don't think JD Vance has that in him. I mean, this is a guy who changed his name 3 times. He changed his religion 3 times. And not Marco Rubio, same thing. He's showed himself as a completely wishy-washy person, but you can't be the next Trump. I mean, the only way to be the next Trump is to be worse than Trump. And I mean, what's worse? What do you expect?
So many people say that an invasion of Greenland would be the end of NATO. As we're still talking, NATO is still with us. But I mean, what kind of state is it in? How can you take it seriously when, against adversaries like Russia or China, the biggest member of NATO, and obviously, let's be honest, the most important, is kind of fighting with all its friends? I mean, the Kremlin must be rubbing their hands together looking at this.
The funny thing is, I've written 5 books, right? Four New York Times bestsellers about Trump's relationship with Moscow, right, and their long history together. And answering the question: Is Trump a Manchurian candidate? Was he groomed to come into this job? No. Trump uses Russia as much as Russia uses him, right? He's enamored with Moscow. He's enamored with Putin, but he was also enamored with Xi of China and Kim Jong Il of Korea. He loves dictators, loves them, and he wants to be one. He wants to be in that club. He wants his orders followed implicitly, no matter what the laws say. So that being said, NATO still is a treaty alliance of 32 nations. Should the United States invoke NATO Article 13 and withdraw, we will lose a big capacity. But the capacity that we're going to lose is the ability to fight transatlantically. So will you, the United States. And I wrote a Substack article called 10 Consequences of a US NATO war. Consequence number one: the US economy collapses that very day. Done. Smashed. Right? It'll make the stock market crash of the 1930s look like a Sunday school picnic, because America will be seen by markets as having lost its mind, right? Two, transatlantic shipping. 6 out of the 10 largest shipping companies in this world, including Maersk out of Denmark, right, are European. They will cease to ship anything to the United States. It will become a hostile nation. So you might have 28 nations of NATO combined, but America's ability to project power from the East Coast stops midway through the Atlantic. British bases will close. Intelligence will cut off. All bases in Europe will shut off. Their first refueling point will be Egypt. So they can't project global power anymore. So no, NATO is not going anywhere. Question is, who's going to stand up and become the leader that will guide NATO as a European, as a transatlantic Canada and European alliance?
I guess maybe the issue that I kind of see with the with Europe, that message clearly is not getting across to Donald Trump. Like whatever everything you've just said, if he is not kind of thinking rationally about those consequences, I mean, it doesn't matter if he's going to do it anyway.
His whole operating system is dillygaff, right? Do I look like I give a flip? No, he does not. Laws mean nothing to him. Boundaries that have been established and solidified in blood of D-Day mean nothing to him. This is about money and enriching himself and his family personally. And he also understands his mortality is coming. He's mentioned that himself. He does not care about the world order. And the world had better be ready to deal with a Trump regime, not the United States, a Trump regime that will seize Greenland, threaten Canada, quite possibly go into open warfare in Greenland with NATO. And here's the kicker: you can jump into Greenland and take those three airstrips, but you can't sustain yourself there. They don't have the wherewithal to do that. Europe could respond very quickly with, I mean, we just put fighters in Iceland for an air exclusion zone. So the United States could find itself isolated and its troops starving and freezing.
So does Europe need its own Trump? And I don't mean that literally. I mean in terms of like this kind of this sort of like neoliberal kind of diplomacy style that, like I just said, clearly isn't working on Trump. Do you need someone to sort of stand up eye to him? And if so, who is that going to be?
Sure. I mean, to tell you the truth, I think it'll be Francois Macron, Macron of France, because he'll see it. Oh, this is a very clever guy. This is a guy who will say, I can be the new de Gaulle.
I'm glad you mentioned, because him and Macron always publicly, to me and I guess others in the media, they've always seemed like kind of great buddies. He's kind of seemed to get on his right side, and obviously last night Trump then out of nowhere just posted private messages from him to his Truth Social account with barely any context at all.
Yeah, but you have to understand this is the way that they behave in the Trump White House is everything is a weapon system. Everything is malicious. No rules or norms are too great to be broken. I mean, the man violates the Constitution of the United States every day, and I hope he'll be held accountable for it. I hope he lives that long, right? To where the great recalibration and can happen, and that he whatever he is sullied can be turned around. But with regards to Europe, the question, I mean, everyone is trying to be genteel within, how can I put it, in a very 1939 sort of way, right? It's you want to go over to Berlin. Let's go to Berlin and let's talk to them on their terrain. But I suspect if this keeps spiraling out of control, and I'm going to be in Greenland for some time, um, you're going to start seeing harsher things. Trump likes obsequience. And what he really, really needs, he does this little thing. And the reason he released those statements from Jens Stoltenberg and from Macron
It
is
was
he likes to
Mark
do this thing he
Rutte.
calls the NATO secretaries. They change so often. But um, he likes this ritualistic humiliation where he will take your private statements and make them public and make you eat your words. And so he thinks that he's speaking to the Front National, right? And the people on the far right in France, that this guy, he's two-faced. But Trump's two-faced. He just exposed your stuff. You got to stop playing games with this guy. You got to start playing hardball.
Okay, just finally, I do think often there's a difference with how Donald Trump performs kind of on Truth Social and when he's back in the US to when he's meeting people personally. Obviously, like I said, a lot of leaders are meeting in Davos this week. Do you think at all there's any likelihood that after sort of meeting them in the room together and talking, we might be in a not a completely different position, but we might be in a slightly different place towards the end of this week?
I don't think he has the ability to retain positions and ideas over minutes. And I'm getting this from people who knew him for decades. They were like, "Hey, this guy now, completely different person, can't think past 5 minutes." That thing about he listens to the last person who's in the room. Vladimir Putin always calls and makes sure that he is the last person he listens to. So he will go there, he will schmooze, he will talk about how his tariff threat, which is a tax on the American taxpayer, is getting Europe to comply. And this is what he wants, your compliance. He does not care about what's good for you or your nation. It's about what's good for him. And he requires ritualistic humiliation. At some point, when the treaty kicks in and he decides he's going to either thinks that you're so soft, especially Britain and France, that you're not going to get involved. He's banking on Britain going neutral for NATO, neutral, right? And really thinks he's going to be able to fly aircraft to Mildenhall to strike Iran. Yeah, he may find the entire U.S. Army Air Force Europe out of England if he attacks Greenland, may be prisoners of war. So he has not factored in any of this. And I don't think he cares what the generals say. I don't think he cares at all what the consequences are. It is in his mind, and he's maintaining it as a fact.
Okay, sorry, absolutely final question. You talked about Britain there. Nigel Farage, Reform UK leader, I would say I'd probably put quite a good bet on him probably being the next Prime Minister of the UK as well. He's a big friend of Trump's. He said yesterday that This week marks the biggest fracture of the relationship between the US and the UK since the Suez Crisis in 1956. Yes or no?
Yeah, I heard that. And wow. I mean, I want you guys to think about this for a second, right? Nigel Farage, who, by the way, he's doomed. This statement that he's making about fracturing since the Suez Crisis, Eisenhower, kicking Britain out of Suez, that shows how bad things are in Europe. You cannot associate yourself with Trump and Greenland. I think Farage, by the way, is about to get the Pierre Polyev treatment. I think all the right wing groups in Europe are about to get screwed at a level that they can't imagine. Polyev was leading here in Canada and was set to win. And then when people saw the alliance with Trump, that he would be, would bow to Trump, they washed him away. And let me tell you, Nigel Farage, he has to run from Trump. He has to make statements like this. The problem is, if Trump takes any action in the next few months, which makes it look that anyone who sucked up to him, and Farage is a massive suck up, you're done in Europe because it's going to be the flag. Are British troops going to be engaged in combat with America? And you better be looking at the United States like George III looked at the United States, right? Better be starting to you revive the ghost of General Clinton and Howe and get them back to start fighting because you may be engaged in a war with America.
Malcolm Nance, thank you very much for joining us on the show, and hope it all goes well in Greenland. Like I say to everyone watching, if you want to catch that, that we'll be bringing you content right here on the Trump Reports YouTube channel. But for now, Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It'll be great.